The morning sun barely broke through the thick canopy of trees as David made his way up the mountain trail. He'd been hiking since dawn, enjoying the peace that only the wilderness could offer. After spending 12 years as a paramedic in the city, he'd traded the chaos for something quieter. Now he worked as a wilderness guide, taking groups through these mountains, teaching them survival skills, and helping them reconnect with nature. Today, though, he was alone. Just him, his backpack, and miles of untouched forest. This was his therapy, his way of recharging after a busy season of tours. The trail was familiar, one he'd walked dozens of times before. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the only sounds were his boots crunching against the rocky path and birds calling to each other in the distance. But then something else cut through the silence. A scream, high-pitched and desperate. David froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the radio on his belt. Another scream echoed through the trees, closer this time. Without thinking, he dropped his leisurely pace and ran toward the sound, his old training kicking in. His heart pounded as he jumped over fallen logs and pushed through thick brush, following the cries. He found her in a small clearing, collapsed against a boulder. A woman, probably in her late 20s, clutching her left leg with both hands. Her face was pale, twisted in pain, and sweat dripped down her forehead despite the cool mountain air. Next to her, slithering away into the rocks, was a rattlesnake, its tail still buzzing a warning. "Help me," she gasped, her voice shaking. "Please, something bit me." David rushed to her side, his eyes immediately scanning her leg. 2 puncture marks on her calf, already surrounded by swelling and redness. The skin around the bite was starting to turn purple. His stomach dropped. This was bad. "I'm here, you're going to be okay," he said, keeping his voice calm even though his mind was racing. "My name's David, I used to be a paramedic. I need you to stay as still as possible, all right?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It hurts so much. I didn't even see it until—" I know. Try not to move that leg. What's your name?" "Claire," she managed to say between shallow breaths. David quickly shrugged off his backpack and pulled out his first aid kit. His hands worked fast but steady. He'd treated snake bites before, but never this far from help. They were at least 8 miles from the nearest road, and his radio wasn't picking up any signal this deep in the mountains. "No cell phone towers out here either. Claire, listen to me. I need to wrap this to slow down the spread of the venom. It's going to feel tight, but that's what we want." "Can you tell me when you were bitten?" Maybe 10 minutes ago." She winced as he began wrapping her leg with a pressure bandage. "I was sitting on that rock, just resting. I put my hand down and—" "You're doing great," David said, though he noticed her breathing was getting more labored. The venom was working fast. He could see her leg swelling more by the minute. "I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay calm. Deep breaths, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth." He looked around the clearing, his mind calculating distances and time. 8 miles carrying someone through rough terrain. It would take hours and every minute counted with snake venom. But there was no choice. No helicopter could land in these dense woods, and waiting for a rescue team would take too long. Claire's expensive hiking boots and brand new gear caught his attention. Her jacket probably cost more than his truck payment. She didn't look like someone who spent much time in the wilderness. The bright pink water bottle, the pristine backpack without a single scratch, the way she'd been sitting on that rock like it was a park bench. She was out of her element, and now she was paying the price. "Claire, have you ever been hiking before?" "Not really," she admitted, her voice getting weaker. I needed to get away. From everything. I didn't tell anyone I was coming here." David's jaw tightened, solo hiking with no experience in rattlesnake territory. But now wasn't the time for lectures. He finished securing the bandage and checked her pulse. Too fast. Her pupils were dilated and her skin felt clammy. "I'm going to be honest with you. We're far from help and I need to carry you out. It's not going to be comfortable, but it's our only option. Can you handle that?" She nodded weakly. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "Not really, no." David worked quickly, using paracord from his pack and sturdy branches to build a makeshift stretcher. His emergency tarp became the bed. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. As he tied the final knots, Claire spoke again, her words slightly slurred. "Why were you out here? Alone?" "I work out here," he said, testing the strength of his creation. "I'm a guide. This is my job. Lucky timing then," she murmured. "For me, I mean." "Yeah, lucky." He looked at her pale face. "All right, this is going to hurt when I move you. Ready? She squeezed her eyes shut and nodded. As gently as possible, David lifted her onto the stretcher. She cried out, and he felt his chest tighten with sympathy. But there was no time to waste. He secured her with more cord to keep her from sliding off, grabbed the handles of the stretcher and lifted. The weight hit him immediately. Not just her, but the awkward distribution of the makeshift stretcher. His shoulders burned, but he pushed forward one step at a time. The trail ahead was brutal. Rocky inclines, narrow passages, and several creek crossings. It would test every ounce of his strength. "Talk to me, Claire," he said as he navigated around a fallen tree. "Tell me something, anything. I need to know you're still with me." "Like what?" Her voice was faint. "Why'd you come out here alone? You said you needed to get away." There was a long pause. For a moment he thought she'd passed out. Then she spoke, her words barely above a whisper. "My dad died 3 months ago, and everyone wants something from me now. They all have plans for my life. Where I should live, who I should marry, what I should do with his company. I just wanted one day where nobody could find me. One day where I wasn't Claire Whitmore, the heiress, just Claire." David's foot slipped on loose gravel, but he caught himself. Whitmore. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't place it. Some kind of business family, probably. Rich, obviously. But out here, none of that mattered. Out here, she was just a woman who needed help. And he was the only one who could give it. "Well, Claire, who's not an heiress," he said, his breathing heavy as he climbed a steep section of trail. "Today you're just someone I'm trying to keep alive. So stay with me, okay? Keep talking." "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The sun climbed higher as David pushed forward, sweat soaking through his shirt. His arms screamed in protest, his back ached, and his legs felt like lead. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Because somewhere in the distance was help, and between here and there was just him, this woman, and whatever strength he had left. 4 hours. That's how long it took David to carry Claire down that mountain. 4 hours of pure hell, his muscles screaming, his hands blistered from gripping the stretcher poles. By the time he stumbled onto the Forest Service road, his legs were shaking so badly he could barely stand. The park ranger's truck appeared like a miracle around the bend. David waved his arms frantically, nearly dropping the stretcher in his exhaustion. The ranger, an older man named Tom, who David knew from his guide work, slammed on the brakes and jumped out. "Dear God, what happened?" "Rattlesnake bite," David gasped, his throat raw. "She needs anti-venom now." Tom didn't waste time with questions. Within minutes, they had Claire loaded into the truck bed, and Tom was on his radio calling for an ambulance to meet them at the ranger station. David climbed in back with her, holding her hand as the truck bounced down the dirt road. Her eyes were barely open, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me, Claire. We're almost there. Just a little longer." She squeezed his hand weakly but didn't speak. Her skin had taken on a grayish color that made David's stomach turn. He'd done everything right, everything by the book, but snake venom was unpredictable. You never really knew if it would be enough until it was over. The ambulance was waiting at the station, lights already flashing. The paramedics took over immediately, loading Claire onto their gurney, starting an IV, asking rapid-fire questions that David answered on autopilot. Years of medical training kicked in even through his exhaustion. He gave them everything they needed to know, then watched as they drove away, sirens wailing. Tom put a hand on David's shoulder. "You saved her life, you know that?" David just nodded, too tired to speak. His whole body hurt. His shirt was soaked with sweat and dirt. His hands were bleeding from blisters, and he was pretty sure he'd twisted his ankle somewhere on that mountain. But she was alive. That was what mattered. Tom drove him back to town and dropped him at his small cabin on the edge of the national park. David showered, ate half a sandwich, and collapsed into bed. He slept for 14 hours straight. When he woke up the next morning, his phone had 6 missed calls from the hospital. His heart jumped. Had something gone wrong? He called back immediately. "Mr. Reynolds? This is Mercy General Hospital. We're calling about Claire Whitmore. She's asking to see you. Is she okay?" "She's stable. The anti-venom worked. She's going to be fine thanks to your quick action, but she's been quite insistent about speaking with you." David told them he'd come by later that afternoon. He spent the morning catching up on work emails and rescheduling the hiking tours he'd missed. His business partner, an ex-Army guy named Kevin, had covered for him without complaint. "Heard you played hero yesterday," Kevin said over the phone. "Very on brand for you." "Just did what anyone would do." "Yeah." Except most people wouldn't have been able to carry someone 8 miles down a mountain. You're getting soft in your old age, Dave. Took you 4 hours. David laughed despite himself. Next time you can do it. The hospital was a 30-minute drive into town. David felt weird walking through the sterile white hallways in his flannel shirt and work boots. A nurse directed him to Claire's room on the 3rd floor. He knocked gently before entering. She looked different. Still pale but alert. Her dark hair was pulled back and she was sitting up in bed looking at her phone. When she saw him, her eyes welled up with tears. "You came," she said, her voice cracking. "The hospital said you wanted to see me. How are you feeling?" "Alive because of you." She set her phone down, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry, I've been emotional all day. The doctors told me what you did. 4 hours carrying me. They said most people would have panicked or done the wrong thing. But you knew exactly what to do." David shifted uncomfortably, not used to this kind of attention. "I was just in the right place at the right time." "No," Claire's voice was firm. "You were prepared. You were skilled, and you didn't give up on some stranger you found in the woods. The doctor said another hour and the venom could have caused permanent damage. Or worse, they talked for a while." Claire asked about his work, his life in the mountains. David asked how she was really feeling, beyond the physical. She admitted she was shaken, not just by the snake bite but by the whole experience. "I keep thinking about how stupid I was," she said quietly. "Going out there alone with no experience, not telling anyone where I was going. I could have died because I was running away from my problems." "We all do stupid things sometimes," David said. "The important thing is you learned from it." A nurse came in to check Claire's vitals, and David took that as his cue to leave. He stood up, but Claire grabbed his arm. "Wait. I know this might sound weird, but can I have your number? I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe thank you properly once I'm out of here." David hesitated. Something about her world and his didn't seem like they'd mix well, but she looked so genuine, so hopeful, that he found himself writing his number on the notepad by her bed. "Sure. Just focus on getting better, okay?" 2 days later, a man in an expensive suit showed up at David's cabin. He introduced himself as Richard Chen, attorney for the Whitmore family. David's stomach sank. He'd looked up the name after leaving the hospital. Whitmore Industries. Billions of dollars. Claire wasn't just rich. She was wealthy in a way David couldn't even comprehend. "Mr. Reynolds, my client wishes to express her gratitude for saving her life," Richard said, his tone professional but warm. He handed David an envelope. "This is a token of her appreciation." David opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000. His hands went numb. "I can't accept this," he said immediately, trying to hand it back. Richard smiled slightly. "I told Miss Whitmore you'd say that. She insisted I tell you that this money means nothing to her compared to her life. She wants you to have it. Use it for your business, take a vacation, do whatever you want. But please accept it. It would mean a lot to her." David stared at the check. $50,000 would change his life. He could expand his guide service, fix the roof on his cabin, maybe even hire another full-time employee. But it felt wrong taking money for doing the right thing. "There's one more thing," Richard continued. "Miss Whitmore would like to invite you to dinner at her family estate this weekend. Just to say thank you properly. No pressure, but she'd be honored if you'd come." David didn't know what to say. Dinner at a mansion? With someone who lived in a completely different world? But curiosity got the better of him. "Okay, I'll come." That Saturday, David drove his beat-up truck through the gates of an estate that looked like something from a movie. Manicured lawns, fountains, a house that was bigger than his entire apartment building back in the city. He felt completely out of place in his clean jeans and button-up shirt. The nicest clothes he owned. Claire met him at the door herself, and she looked like a different person from the terrified woman on the mountain, elegant, composed, but her smile was genuine and warm. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "Almost didn't," David admitted. "This is a little out of my comfort zone. Mine too, honestly. Come on, let's skip the formal dining room. I had them set up dinner on the back terrace. It's more normal." They ate outside under string lights, and to David's surprise, the conversation flowed easily. Claire asked about his transition from paramedic to guide, and he asked about her father, carefully, gently. She opened up in a way that seemed like she hadn't been able to with many people. "Everyone sees the money in the company," she said, pushing food around her plate. "But nobody asks how I'm actually doing. Except you. Even on that mountain dying from a snake bite, you asked me why I was there." You actually cared about the answer. Of course I did. You're a person, not just a last name. Claire looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That's exactly what I needed to hear. As the evening ended and David prepared to leave, he realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about gratitude anymore. They'd connected, really connected in a way that surprised them both, and as he drove home that night, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, their worlds weren't as far apart as he'd thought. The weeks after that dinner surprised David in ways he didn't expect. Claire started texting him, just casual stuff at first. A photo of a hiking boot with the caption, "Broke these in, finally." A question about what kind of water filter to buy. Small things that made him smile. Then one Tuesday afternoon, his phone rang. It was Claire. "I know this is random, but do you have any tours scheduled this week?" "Nothing until Friday." "Why, can I hire you?" "Just for me. I want to do that hike again." "The right way this time," David hesitated. "Claire, are you sure?" "That's a lot to process going back to where it happened. That's exactly why I need to do it. I can't let fear win. Plus, I'll have the best guide in the state. What could go wrong?" He heard the smile in her voice and found himself agreeing. They planned it for Thursday, an easier trail this time, one with cell service and ranger stations nearby. When she showed up at the trailhead, David almost laughed. She'd clearly done her research. Proper boots broken in, a reasonable backpack not too big or small, layers of clothing that actually made sense for mountain weather. She even had a whistle attached to her pack. "Did I pass inspection?" she asked, spinning around. "You look like you actually know what you're doing now. I watched about 40 YouTube videos. I'm pretty sure I could survive a bear attack, build a shelter, and purify water with my bare hands at this point." The hike was beautiful. Fall had started painting the mountains in shades of gold and red. They took it slow, and David taught her things as they went. How to read trail markers, what plants to avoid, how to check the weather by looking at clouds. Claire absorbed everything like a sponge, asking questions that showed she was really thinking about it. Around noon, they stopped by a stream for lunch. Claire sat on a rock, the same way she'd been sitting when the snake bit her, but this time she checked carefully first. David noticed but didn't say anything. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said, unwrapping her sandwich. "Why did you leave being a paramedic? You were clearly good at it." David took a long drink from his water bottle, thinking about how to answer. Burnout, mostly. 12 years of night shifts, trauma calls, watching people at their worst moments. It gets to you after a while. I needed something that felt more, I don't know, balanced. Out here, I'm still helping people, but in a different way. Teaching them. Showing them beauty instead of just seeing pain all the time. Claire nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. Balance. My father built this empire and everyone expects me to run it the same way he did. But I'm not him. I don't know if I even want what he wanted." "What do you want?" She laughed, but it sounded sad. "That's the million-dollar question. Literally. I have all this money, all these resources, and I don't know what I actually want to do with my life. Isn't that ridiculous?" "Not ridiculous, human." David tossed a pebble into the stream. "Most people spend their whole lives figuring that out. You're just doing it with more zeros in your bank account." They finished the hike without incident, and David felt proud watching Claire navigate the trail confidently. She was a quick learner, and more importantly, she didn't give up when things got hard. There was real strength in her that hadn't been visible that first day. Over the next month, their friendship deepened in unexpected ways. Claire came on more hikes, sometimes alone with David, sometimes joining his regular tour groups. She loved talking to the other clients, people from all walks of life who just wanted to experience nature. David noticed she seemed more relaxed on the mountain than she ever did in photos he'd seen of her at business events. One evening, after a particularly long hike, they grabbed burgers at David's favorite diner in town. Nothing fancy, just red vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played country music. Claire fit right in, laughing with the waitress and stealing fries from David's plate. "I have a confession," she said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "I've been using you as an excuse to escape board meetings." "Oh, really?" "Yeah. My assistant has standing instructions that if I have a hiking appointment with you, nothing short of a building fire can reschedule it. Richard thinks I've lost my mind, but my therapist says it's the healthiest thing I've done in years." David smiled. "Glad I could be your excuse to play hooky." "It's more than that, though." Claire's expression turned serious. "You treat me like a normal person. Everyone else in my life wants something or expects something or is measuring me against my father.
But you just see me.
Do you know how rare that is? Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. It was Kevin, his business partner. The text made his stomach drop. Everything okay? Claire asked, noticing his expression. Yeah, just business stuff. Nothing urgent, but it was urgent. Kevin had forwarded him an article from a gossip website. The headline read, Whitmore Heiress's Secret Mountain Man Romance or Rescue. There was a photo of them from last week's hike, clearly taken with a telephoto lens. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, just walking and talking, but the article spun it into something else entirely. It called David a rugged wilderness guide who saved the billionaire beauty, and speculated about their relationship. Claire saw his face and reached for his phone. He didn't stop her. She read the article, her jaw tightening with each line. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have warned you. This is what my life is like. People follow me, photograph me, make up stories. I thought maybe out here in the middle of nowhere we'd be safe from it. It's okay. It's not okay. Look what they're calling you. They're making it sound like you're using me or something. She scrolled down to the comments section and her face went pale. Oh God, don't read those, but David had already seen enough. Half the comments called him a gold digger. The other half made crude jokes about what he was really getting out of the friendship. A few even suggested he'd stage the entire snakebite rescue. This is insane, David said. People actually believe this stuff? Some do. And even if they don't believe it, they enjoy talking about it. Claire put the phone face down on the table. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The media loves a story like this. Poor girl meets rich girl. They'll twist it every way they can. David felt something cold settle in his chest. This was Claire's normal. Being watched, judged, having every friendship questioned. He lived a quiet life by choice, and suddenly that privacy felt very precious and very threatened. What do we do? He asked. Ignore it. It'll blow over. But Claire didn't sound convinced. The next few days proved her wrong. More articles appeared, each one more invasive than the last. Someone dug up David's old employment records and made a big deal about him leaving the paramedic job, suggesting he was running from something. Another outlet tracked down his ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago and got her to say some unflattering things that had nothing to do with Claire. David's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters called his business line. Someone even showed up at his cabin with a camera. Kevin called him, concerned. Dave, this is getting out of hand. I've got people calling the office asking about you and Claire Whitmore. What's going on? We're friends. That's it. But apparently, that's a news story now. The breaking point came when David showed up for a scheduled tour with a family and found 3 photographers waiting in the parking lot. They shouted questions at him, asking about Claire, about their relationship, about whether he was after her money. The family looked uncomfortable and asked if they should reschedule. David felt anger rise in his chest, but he swallowed it down. No, we're doing this hike. Ignore them, but it was hard to ignore. The photographers followed them up the trail for the first mile, until David threatened to call the rangers. Even after they turned back, the whole experience was ruined. The father kept glancing at David strangely, like he was trying to figure out if the articles were true. That night, David sat on his porch with a beer, staring at the mountains. His phone buzzed with another text from Claire. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I never should have dragged you into my world. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on. It's not your fault, but we need to talk about this, and tomorrow, I'll come to you. David went to bed that night feeling like something precious was slipping through his fingers, and he didn't know how to hold on to it. Claire showed up at David's cabin the next morning looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore sunglasses even though it was overcast. She took them off when she sat down on his porch steps, and David could see the dark circles under her eyes. I tried to get them to stop, she said without preamble. I had Richard send cease and desist letters to the worst offenders, but they're just making it worse. Now they're writing articles about how I'm trying to silence the press. David sat down next to her, keeping a careful distance between them. Even that felt calculated now, and he hated it. This is your life all the time? Pretty much. Sometimes it dies down, but there's always someone watching, waiting for a story. She picked at a splinter on the wooden step. My father used to say that privacy was the real luxury. Not money, not cars or houses. Privacy. I never really understood what he meant until after he died and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of me. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the pine trees. David's dog, a mixed breed named Scout, came and put his head on Claire's lap. She scratched behind his ears absently. "There's something else," Claire said finally. "Something I need to tell you. My ex-fiancé, Brandon, he's behind some of this. Not the initial article, but the follow-up stuff. The digging into your past, the interviews with your ex." Richard's investigator confirmed it. David felt his jaw tighten. Why would he do that? Because he wants me back. Or more accurately, he wants the Whitmore money back. We were together for 3 years. Everyone thought we were perfect. But after my father died, I realized Brandon never actually loved me. He loved the lifestyle, the access, the power that came with being engaged to me. When I called off the wedding, he lost all of that. So he's trying to make me look bad. He's trying to make you look like him, a fortune hunter, someone who's only around me for what I can give you. Claire's voice cracked slightly. And it's working. The board members at my company are questioning my judgment. They're saying I'm not fit to lead if I can't even see through some guy who's obviously using me. I'm not using you. I know that. But perception is reality in my world. And right now the perception is that you're either after my money or I'm having some kind of breakdown and making poor decisions. She stood up abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. My uncle called me yesterday. He's on the board. He said that if I don't get this situation under control, they're going to push for a vote of no confidence. They could force me out of my own father's company. David stood too, anger building in his chest. Not at Claire, but at the whole ridiculous situation. So what are you saying? That we can't be friends because some tabloid vultures and your ex-fiancé are spreading lies? I'm saying that being my friend comes with a cost. And I don't think I realized how high that cost would be. For you, I mean. Claire turned to face him and there were tears in her eyes. You have a good life here, David, a simple, peaceful life. I'm ruining that. You're not ruining anything. They are. But they come with me. They're part of the package. This is what being in my life means. She wiped at her eyes angrily. And it's not fair to you. You saved my life. You've been nothing but kind to me, and now you're being dragged through the mud because of it. David wanted to argue, wanted to say that he didn't care what people thought. But that wasn't entirely true. He did care. Not about the rich people in tabloids, but about his business. His reputation in this small town, his peace of mind. The photographers, the invasive questions, the constant feeling of being watched. It was wearing on him, and it had only been a few weeks. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. Claire looked at him for a long moment. I think we need some distance. Not forever, just until this blows over. Until I can get the board under control and deal with Brandon and let the media find someone else to obsess over. It felt like a punch to the gut, even though David knew she was probably right. Okay. Claire looked surprised, maybe hurt that he'd agreed so quickly. What else can we do? You're right. This is affecting your company, my business, everything. Maybe some space would be good. The words tasted bitter, but he forced them out anyway. Claire nodded, tears spilling over now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You deserved better than this. She left a few minutes later and David watched her expensive car disappear down the dirt road. Scout whined next to him, like he knew something had just broken. The next week was hell. David threw himself into work, taking on extra tours, staying busy enough that he didn't have time to think. But the media attention didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Someone leaked that Claire had visited his cabin, and now there were articles speculating about a secret goodbye, a lover's quarrel, all sorts of nonsense. Kevin pulled him aside after a tour. Man, you need to address this. It's affecting bookings. People are canceling because they don't want to get caught up in your drama. It's not my drama. I'm just trying to live my life. I know, but that doesn't matter. Look, I'm not saying drop Claire as a friend if that's what she is to you, but maybe you need to make a statement or something. Tell people to back off. David knew Kevin was right, but the idea of feeding into the media circus made him sick. He'd always been a private person, and now his private life was entertainment for strangers. Things came to a head 2 weeks later. David was leading a tour when a photographer jumped out of the bushes near a scenic overlook, camera raised. One of David's clients, startled, stumbled backward and nearly fell off the trail. David grabbed the man just in time, his heart racing. Are you insane? David shouted at the photographer. Someone could have been seriously hurt. Just doing my job, man. Public trail, public space. Something snapped in David. All the frustration, the anger, the feeling of being hunted, it all came bubbling up. He stepped toward the photographer, fists clenched. Kevin, who was co-leading the tour, grabbed David's arm. "Not worth it," Kevin said quietly. "Don't give them more ammunition." David forced himself to breathe, to step back. But his hands were shaking. This wasn't him. He wasn't an angry person, wasn't someone who got into confrontations. But they'd pushed him to a breaking point. That night, David made a decision. He sat down and wrote an email to Claire. Not a text, but an actual email because he needed to say everything without interruption. He wrote about how much her friendship had meant to him, how she'd brought something unexpected and beautiful into his life. He wrote about the snake bite, about watching her grow from someone terrified and out of place in the wilderness to someone confident and capable. He told her he was proud of her, but he also wrote about the toll the attention was taking, how he'd started second-guessing everything, looking over his shoulder, feeling anxious in his own home, how it was affecting his work, his peace of mind, his sense of self. He wrote that maybe distance wasn't temporary, maybe it needed to be permanent because their worlds were just too different. He ended the email by returning the $50,000 check she'd given him. He'd never cashed it, had kept it in a drawer as a reminder of the day he'd met her. But now it felt like evidence of something people were accusing him of. He didn't want her money. He never had. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he wrote. "And I hope someday you're free enough to just be Claire, not Claire Whitmore. You deserve that. Take care of yourself." He hit send before he could change his mind, then sat in the dark of his cabin, feeling like he'd just lost something irreplaceable. 3 days passed without a response. David tried not to check his email, tried to pretend it didn't matter. But it did matter, more than he wanted to admit. On the 4th day, his phone rang. It was Richard, Claire's attorney. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm calling to inform you that Miss Whitmore has entered a period of intensive business negotiations. She's asked that I handle the return of your check, which she refuses to accept back. She's also instructed me to tell you that she understands your decision and respects it." "That's it?" "That's it. She's also instructed her security team to keep the media away from your property and business. You shouldn't have any more trouble with photographers or reporters. She's taking care of it." After Richard hung up, David sat there feeling hollow. It was over. Clean, final, done. He'd thought that's what he wanted, but now that he had it, it felt all wrong. Claire was moving on, handling her business, protecting him even as he walked away. And David was left in his quiet cabin with his quiet life, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 months passed like a slow, gray winter. David went through the motions of his life, leading tours, maintaining trails, doing all the things he'd loved before. But something was missing, and he knew exactly what it was. True to her word, Claire had made the media attention stop. No more photographers, no more invasive articles. It was like someone had flipped a switch. David's life returned to normal, quiet and peaceful, exactly how he'd always wanted it. Except now that quiet felt lonely. Kevin noticed it during their weekly planning meeting at the local coffee shop. "You've been miserable for months, you know that?" "I'm fine. You're not fine. You check your phone every 5 minutes like you're waiting for a call that's never going to come. You barely eat. You smile at clients, but it doesn't reach your eyes anymore." Kevin stirred his coffee, watching David carefully. "Look, I don't know exactly what happened between you and Claire Whitmore, and it's none of my business. But whatever it was, you need to deal with it. This half-life you're living, it's not working," David wanted to argue, but Kevin was right. He'd pushed Claire away to protect his peace, and now he had peace but no joy. The mountains still took his breath away, but there was no one to share that wonder with. He'd go on hikes and think of things Claire would have said, questions she would have asked. He'd kept tabs on her through news articles, even though he told himself not to. She'd successfully fought off the board's attempt to remove her. She'd restructured the company, making bold moves that the business press called either genius or reckless, depending on who was writing. She looked powerful and confident in every photo, but David wondered if she was happy. The answer came in an unexpected way. David was at the grocery store when he ran into Richard, Claire's attorney. The older man looked surprised to see him, then smiled. "David, how have you been?" "Good, fine. You?" "Busy as always." Richard hesitated, then said, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Claire's been asking about you." Not directly, but she asks about the hiking trails, about whether the tourist season has been good. She's checking on you without checking on you, if that makes sense. David's heart did something complicated in his chest. How is she? Successful, powerful, lonely. Richard adjusted his glasses. She won a major victory against the board last month. Proved to everyone that she's more than capable of running the company. But at the celebration dinner, she left early. Said she'd rather be on a mountain trail than in a ballroom. Her words, not mine. After Richard left, David stood in the cereal aisle for a full 5 minutes, just thinking. He'd walked away because he thought their worlds were too different, that the cost of being in her life was too high. But what if he'd been wrong? What if the real cost was living without her? That night, David did something he hadn't done in months. He wrote to Claire. Not an email this time, but an actual letter, handwritten on regular notebook paper. He wrote about the past 3 months, about how the quiet he'd fought so hard to protect felt empty now. He wrote about a hike he'd led where he saw a family of deer and immediately wished she'd been there to see them. He wrote about how he'd been afraid of losing himself in her world, but had ended up losing something more important by walking away. I was wrong, he wrote. I thought your world and my world couldn't mix. But maybe the point isn't about worlds at all. Maybe it's about two people who make each other better, who see each other clearly, who choose each other despite the complications. I don't know if you still want that. I don't know if I've ruined everything by being a coward. But I needed you to know that I miss you. Not the heiress, not the CEO, just Claire. I miss my friend. He mailed it before he could overthink it and spent the next week in agony, wondering if she'd even respond. The response came, but not in a form he expected. 10 days after he mailed the letter, Claire showed up at his cabin at 6 a.m. David opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair sticking up, completely unprepared. Claire? She looked different. Her hair was shorter, cut to her shoulders. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt that looked well-worn, not designer. And she was crying. I got your letter, she said, her voice shaking. I've read it about 100 times. And I have something I need to say, but if I don't say it right now, I'm going to lose my nerve. David stepped back, letting her in. Scout bounded over, tail wagging, and Claire bent down to pet him, buying herself a moment. I've spent the past 3 months proving everyone wrong, she said, still crouched next to the dog. The board, Brandon, the media, everyone who said I couldn't handle the company. And I did it. I proved I'm capable and strong and all the things a Whitmore is supposed to be. She looked up at David, tears streaming down her face. But I've been miserable. Every success felt hollow because the one person I wanted to share it with wasn't there. Claire, let me finish. She stood up, wiping her eyes. You were right to walk away. I wasn't being fair to you. I let you get caught up in my mess without really thinking about what it would cost you. But you were also wrong about something. You said our worlds were too different. But David, you are my world. You're the only person who makes me feel like myself. Without you, I'm just going through motions, playing a part. David felt like his chest might explode. So what do we do? The media, the pressure, the scrutiny, that's all still there. I know, but I have a plan. Claire pulled out her phone and showed him a press release. This goes out tomorrow. I'm announcing a major restructuring of my role at the company. I'm staying on as chairwoman, but I'm hiring a CEO to handle day-to-day operations. Someone brilliant who actually wants to be in boardrooms and deal with investors. I'm stepping back to focus on the company's environmental and conservation initiatives. Claire, you don't have to change your whole life for... I'm not changing my life. I'm finally living it. This is what I want. My father built a company, but that doesn't mean I have to run it the same way. I can do more good focusing on conservation work. And it means I can split my time. Part of it here, part of it there, finding actual balance instead of just burning out. David stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Well, except maybe that I shouldn't sit on rocks in rattlesnake territory. She smiled through her tears. I'm not asking you to enter my world, David. I'm asking if I can be part of yours. Really part of it. No more separate lives, no more distance. Just us figuring it out together. David closed the space between them and pulled her into a hug. She buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her shake with relief. I missed you so much, he said into her hair. I missed you too, every single day. They spent the morning on his porch drinking coffee and talking about everything. Claire told him about the board battles, about standing up to Brandon when he tried to manipulate her, about finally understanding what she wanted from life. David told her about the emptiness of the past 3 months, about realizing too late that some complications were worth it. "I'm still going to mess up," Claire warned. "There will still be media attention sometimes. There will still be obligations and events I have to attend. It won't always be easy, I know, but we'll figure it out, together this time, instead of you trying to protect me from it." David reached for her hand. "And hey, if I survived carrying you down a mountain for 4 hours, I can survive some awkward galas." Claire laughed, real and bright. "Deal. Though I should warn you, galas are actually more painful than snake bites." Over the next year, they proved that different worlds could not only coexist, but blend into something new. Claire split her time between managing conservation projects and spending weeks in the mountains. She funded David's dream of expanding his guide service into a wilderness therapy program for people dealing with burnout and stress. They taught courses together, combining her business expertise with his outdoor skills. The media still followed them sometimes, but Claire had learned to set boundaries, and David had learned that protecting what mattered didn't mean hiding from the world. They gave one interview on their own terms where they talked about conservation and mental health and the importance of nature. They didn't discuss their relationship, and eventually, the press lost interest in speculating. On the anniversary of the day David found Claire on that mountain, they hiked back to the spot where it all began. Claire insisted, saying she needed to close the loop. "You know what's funny?" she said, standing near the boulder where she'd been bitten. "That snake bite was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me. Worst because, well, obviously. Best because it led me to you. Pretty sure there were easier ways we could have met. Maybe. But nothing worth having comes easy." Claire turned to face him, the mountains spreading out behind her, golden in the afternoon light. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on us. Thank you for coming back, for being brave enough to choose what you actually wanted instead of what everyone expected." They stood there for a moment, two people from completely different worlds who'd found something rare and real. The wilderness stretched around them, endless and beautiful, full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, they both felt completely at peace.